Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Reigniting Small Business Podcast. I'm Laura Richards with SBI, and I am joined today by Patrick Lee, also of SBI, CEO. And we're back with you today to talk a little bit about the Great Small Business Plateau. We touched on this on Tuesday. For those of you who weren't able to watch that podcast, you may want to look it up at the Spark Business Institute YouTube page. To catch up on how we got to where we are today. But Patrick, to you, for a quick reminder, tell us a little bit about the Great Small Business Plateau, the Churn Point, which is what we're going to go into more detail about today, and how we end up there.
So what we talked about on Thursday, I'll do a quick synopsis, but I suggest to everybody that if you haven't looked at it, you will probably want to get it in a little bit more detail. So basically, a business starts, it takes off by nature of being successful, right? It gets some clients, it gets some revenue, it starts to grow. It begins to become a real business. Now, what happens frequently is that the owners of that business don't actually plot out, what is their capacity in that business? What's the optimal revenue level? What is it that they're capable of? They just feel that momentum of growth. They jump on it and they keep growing. And what frequently happens is they pass the point, which we call an equilibrium point. And that equilibrium point is where the business and the systems as designed, the personnel as exists, et cetera, would sit, be comfortable, have the biggest profit. That's your cash cow place. That's where everything works. But because, we're just shooting along there, we shoot right past that, and we end up at what we call a churn point, which is on the Great Small Business Plateau. And that churn point is that we've overshot our equilibrium point. The owner doesn't want to go backwards, right? But now growth has completely slowed. And in fact, there's pressure pushing down. And that owner, not wanting to step back, is starting to spend profits and money and well-earned capital from the successful business to try to keep it up there, to do initiatives to make it, keep growing or go higher. And they start getting extremely frustrated. That's what we call the churn point.
Got it. That sounds like a pretty painful place to be.
It's extremely painful. It's not the place you want to be. In fact, churn points, I don't believe, are sustainable. It's interesting because I have seen businesses that have rested at a churn point for years and years and years and years. But even though their use of their money hasn't made the business go down and they're still making a minimal amount of profit, there's a lot of pain in this. There's a lot of turnover and staff generally. There's burnout on the part of the owner and management. There's a lot of struggle and there's a lot of inefficiencies of using profits and funds in the business, trying desperately to sort of move around or get away from this. I would say that whole burnout, pain, why am I struggling so hard? Why doesn't anything work? That takes its toll.
So Patrick, let me see if I understand what you're saying correctly. When people overshoot equilibrium, they commit a lot of resources in one way or the other, whether it's, through hiring a person, buying equipment, doing whatever that they need to grow. And if they don't successfully navigate to where they want to go, shooting up and out of the plateau, they might end up in this spin cycle you're calling the churn point, where this would be the really uncomfortable time for their business, where they're not only are they not growing, but their profits may be shrinking. Is that right?
That's absolutely correct. What happens is this: you reach this point. You're so used to growth, you're so used to things being easy, that when it starts not happening, you just rethink real quick. You're like, oh, something's wrong here. Let's spend some money on a marketing campaign, or oh, let's buy a piece of equipment that'll give us more capabilities, or let's hire a couple more people because, if they're on the phones dealing with clients, et cetera, we're sure to keep growing. So you're expending the money, you're committing to either personnel or buying a piece of equipment, a lease on a piece of equipment, something like that. You're spending your profits. Let's rebrand or do a branding initiative. And that money is now gone into something that generally doesn't actually push you past that churn point. It's just spending money as you try to keep things there. And the reason for that is that it's all about being in capacity. Like, how much can the business actually go? You go and you push for sales over here, and your focus is over here. And while that's happening, your ability to service your clients drops down. Your customer service drops down. So you turn your attention over there. You push on this. Now sales aren't coming in. And basically, what's happening is this constant movement of this is as high as the organization as a whole can actually get. And when you push over here, you go up a little bit, but then something else is going to bring you down. And all you're doing is trying to maintain at this level. And it's a lot of fuel and, a lot of money, a lot of mental energy, a lot of emotional energy. A lot of your momentum is being spent just for that maintenance in that churn point. So you kind of go up, you come down, you go up, you come down. Extremely painful. And this is the burnout place for small businesses. This is where the business owner has been in business now for 12 years. And the last 4 years, they have not enjoyed themselves, right? And they're feeling burnt out. They're getting very frustrated. They spend a lot of money. It's not doing what it should do. That's where you reach these owners who look at you and they're not happy they own that business. They may not admit it that directly, but this is no longer a walk in the park. This is no longer exciting. It's a chore. The responsibility is heavy. Why is this happening? It's interesting the reasons why this happens. Folks tend to have a certain way in which they look at things. And I have a couple examples. One example, I had an IT company, and this IT company was very much about being the perfect vendor to their clients. Their clients loved them. Okay. They were very good at this. They were very customer attentive. And so they did grow. But then they reached a point, once again, where the growth had stopped, and they were getting frustrated because they would pick up a couple of small clients and then they would lose a couple of small clients. They didn't lose a lot, but they lost enough and they picked up enough that they kind of stayed in the same place. And they started dreaming, like, how do we get past this? And the dream for them was, we get bigger clients. Instead of these smaller clients with 5 employees or 15 employees and 10 computers or 20 computers, let's get clients that have 150 employees, have an incredible amount of nodes on the network, lots of work to be done, etc. And so they would go and they would attempt to cultivate that client. But it didn't quite work that way because they're a small IT firm. They're used to dealing with a 10-employee company. They look that way. They talk that way. They behave that way. Their customer service is that way. If you're one of these huge companies, you have a certain expectation of how vendors are going to present, right? You have a certain expectation of what they look like, how they talk, how you do business, what does a contract do, what does customer service of that vendor feel like? And you can tell when it's a mismatch. You can tell when this person's used to dealing with much smaller clientele. Right? This person is their uniform policy doesn't match how our company works. Or, when we call in, we don't immediately get somebody, and there's not that many levels of expertise to go up when they can't answer the question right away. You just are able to tell. So those clients typically don't end up hiring a vendor who they don't see as being the right cultural fit, the right size, the right appearance to service them. So there's a lot of money expended. There's a lot of angst as you try to develop marketing plans and go out on sales and do all the stuff to get those big clients, which this particular client experienced, but you don't pick them up. And even when you do pick up one, it becomes really painful because it's not a good match, and they start getting frustrated with you. And now you're dependent because they're this big client, they're all this revenue coming in. How do we keep them? Why are they leaving? We're discounting here. We're discounting there. It becomes this massive mismatch that never quite attains the goal that is being chased by going after that type of client.
Wow. I mean, it does sound like things in the churn point can become chaotic, like a cyclone. So if someone was listening to what's going on today and they kind of could identify themselves as being in that churn point, how do you get past it?
Well, there's only two. You really have two choices. Churn points, as I said, are unsustainable. I know folks who have lived there for quite a while, but I would contend that it is a deteriorating proposition, even if it hasn't ended. Whether that's in the burnout, or whether that's in the money available, or whether that's just in the service and the quality that person is being able to perform. But you have two choices, really. One choice is you can rework your company to expand capacity dramatically. And when you rework the company, that allows you then to consider continuing growth, right? Now there is capacity to go out, find additional clients, and go somewhere here. The issue is, though, that I think a lot of owners think that is sort of a little tiny bit at a time kind of approach. Like we'll hire one more person and we'll expand over here a little bit. And generally in these situations, that's not going to do it. You're already strained beyond where your systems want to settle at that equilibrium point. You're up above it and you're trying to stay there. Adding a little piece here, a little piece there is that thing that actually just strains your resources. It just takes money out to do that and it doesn't get you anywhere. So usually that change is a big change. It's a complete, we're going to double the size of our sales floor. We're going to open another office somewhere. We're going to, expand our online capabilities because we've never really paid attention there. And we're going to go regional or national or something like that. And it's a massive change in systems, right? That's choice one. Choice two is that scares me. I don't want to be that much risk, all that change, spending all that money. I just want this pressure to stop. Okay. So if we optimize your business so that you drop down to that equilibrium point where the business is actually designed to be and be effective and efficient, if we can get you down there, then that's absolutely fine. That is a good choice. People think that sounds a lot easier than it is, though, because a lot of times you've spent a lot of money, you've taken on a lot of obligation to be up at this churn point. And this churn point means a certain revenue number, and the equilibrium point means a different one. So what ends up happening is you can't just back off and drop down. You're like, well, I still got to pay for that lease for that equipment. I've got these 3 employees I don't want to let go. There ends up being obligation that makes it a lot more difficult to just drop down to that point.
So you probably know what I'm going to ask you next, but you gave us an example of a client who had a real hard time with it. Why don't you give us an example of a client who successfully navigated their way off the plateau, either toward that equilibrium point, deciding they want to be the lifestyle business, or off of it in the other way to become a growth enterprise and really change their business?
So that's a great one, because one of the best examples I have of this is another IT company, actually. And this one was struggling greatly to expand its market beyond a couple of core clients. What was going to be needed was an approach that was counter to this company's culture. This company's culture was that they were experts. They knew everything there was to know about the area they focused in. They had a reputation for that. They were very competent when they showed up on a job. Boom, everybody knew it was going to be handled. They had a lot of contracts, a lot of government contracts too, that assured them that they were being valued for that performance. But when it came time to try to expand, they were totally competency focused. They were not sales focused. And they didn't really even have a true sales department. Their owner was a gregarious guy, nice fellow, was easy. He could talk, he could do all that. So he would make some deals within his network relationships. He would apply for some contracts, and he would have some success. But the idea that all of a sudden we were going to ramp up and we were going to create, a company that was double in size, we were going to bring on a whole lot more technicians, and this thing was going to go somewhere, required them to completely rethink how they did customer service, how they established relationships, how they upsold, the fact that they were going to need actual marketing. They couldn't just do this on reputation alone. They were going to need professionals who knew sales, knew how to go out and get them, how to chart a pipeline, how to work a CRM, how to do all that stuff. And the amount of investment required to make this happen, and then after you've built it all, to then go and announce it to your market that, okay, we're here you go. It was a substantial investment, and it was sort of a scary investment because you're hiring people that you don't have expertise in. So managing that, knowing what expectations are, knowing if timelines make sense, knowing if this person's performing, there's a certain level of trust, and there's a certain level of, KPIs. Let's make sure, let's track this. But it can be really scary because these folks were, remember, very used to competence first. They could tell you if a technician knew what they were doing. They can tell you how this needed to be done. Now they're in places that they know nothing about, and so that was both scary, and it required a bunch of capital to do this. The good news on it is that after a bunch of fits and starts about making this thing actually work, they ended up with the right person heading up their sales department, and they ended up with the right marketing support. And that expenditure of capital, it took a little bit of time, but they are now selling a ton, and they are moving beyond the markets they were used to. And this has been a successful change to that company's approach.
Wow, that is a good story. Do you have any percentages of outcome? I know that's a really specific question, so I'm putting you on the spot there with that.
So I don't think I could give you true statistical numbers, but I will say this. I think it is incredibly difficult for owners to make it through this process. I think there's an inherent desire on the part of folks to be comfortable. And I think that a churn point, though it's uncomfortable in that you're not getting the results you want, and that, there's pressure downward and there's burnout and all that, the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know. So a lot of times people get used to that. So I would say percentage-wise, I would say that maybe a third of folks actually get through to where they want to be. I think there's a lot of folks who want to make the good old college try, but don't have it in them to power through. And I find that that's what I spend most of my prep work on, is getting the owners to understand that if you're going to go down this path, don't go down it not fully committed right now, right? Don't say, let me dip my toe in, let's try it, let's see where we get. That is almost guaranteeing a lack of success. There needs to be full commitment and a lot of energy to get those systems changed, that massive amount of change to let that business get over here. I think a lot of folks want to dip their toe that way too, because of what we talked about on the last podcast, the idea that folks feel like they should say, I want to be a growth company, versus saying, I want to be a lifestyle company. If we could get past that stigma, or like I'm a failure because I'm not a growth company, a whole lot of people would be more successful in moving their businesses to one of these two. I think it's less of this is so hard to do that it's impossible, don't risk it, and more of if you make the wrong choice, you're inevitably unhappy and it's not going to succeed. So let's make the right choice. Are we going to optimize your business and get you here, or are we going to go all out and we're going to grow it?
Folks, you heard it here first. That's your takeaway for today, isn't it, Patrick?
It's pretty much the takeaway. Don't be scared of those lifestyle business ideas. If you're comfortable and you just need this to be easier and make you a little bit more money, admit your lifestyle business, work on optimizing, find that equilibrium point, get some help to do it. It's not easy to do on your own, but it is doable. And that's a better choice than hanging out at the churn point or risking everything when you're going to get about a third of the way towards it and go, I don't want to do this, and try to crawl your way back.
And if you do need help, don't hesitate to call the Spark Business Institute. We can help you either way, lifestyle business, or if you're going for it. Thank you all for listening today. Patrick, thanks for being here with us and present for this podcast today. We'll be back next Tuesday with another episode of Reigniting Small Business.
Thank you.